While the Tennessee Titans have taken the AFC South the past 2 years running, there's a new team favored to take the division this season. After the Indianapolis Colts were blown out and embarrassed in Week 18 of the regular season by the lowly Jaguars, that caused Indy to miss out on the playoffs, and so changes were inevitable. And it came at the quarterback position. They turned the page on the Carson Wentz experiment after just one season and traded for Matt Ryan, who is embracing the change of scenery.
I am so excited to see what can happen here. I'm coming into a roster that has been set up to win.
In Tennessee, changes were also coming after going one and done in the playoffs as the #1 overall seed. And after rumblings, their #1 wide receiver A.J. Brown was unhappy with his contract, they dealt him to the Eagles on draft night and immediately replaced him with former Arkansas standout Treylon Burks. And on day 2, the Titans stopped the draft day fall of Malik Willis, which didn't appear to sit too well with their current quarterback, Ryan Tannehill.
We're competing against each other. I don't think it's my job to mentor him.
In Jacksonville, the Jaguars tabbed Doug Peterson as their new head coach after the Urban Meyer era lasted just 13 games. And at the very least, Peterson brings a proven amount of high-level success. The Jags spent big in free agency and focused on defense early in the draft, but Peterson's #1 priority is to elevate the play of his new quarterback, Trevor Lawrence.
He's doing a really nice job leading the football team, #1, and just executing the offense.
The Houston Texans will also have a new head coach with Lovie Smith, and he'll have a tall task ahead of him with a roster that is lacking in high-end talent.
Being here this past year, I saw the potential. If you get the right people together, you can achieve some great things.
The AFC South figures to be a 2-horse race between the Colts and the Titans. How will it play out on the field? The countdown towards Week 1 continues.
So here's how the odds makers have a look at the AFC South. Again, we are 60 days away from kickoff of the 2022 NFL season. We are talking win totals today, and here's a look at what the totals are expected to be, or at least the odds makers put them at as we head into the season now. Let's welcome in CBS Sports HQ analyst Todd Fuhrman. Todd, we're going to start with the Colts. We mentioned Yannick Ngakoue, and the big move was going from Carson Wentz and bringing in Matt Ryan. The total is 9.5. What do you think about that number for the Colts?
Extremely disappointed with the way the 2021 season unfolded down the stretch. You go into Jacksonville Week 18 as double-digit favorites, just needing a win to punch your ticket to the postseason, and you fall flat. So obviously Indianapolis felt the need to retool their roster this offseason, Russ, and they finally bring in an adult to lead the quarterback room. And it's not a disparaging shot at Carson Wentz, but I think he didn't have the leadership traits that the Colts team needed when push came to shove last year. We saw a couple seasons ago what Phillip Rivers meant, and I think Matt Ryan can have that same stabilizing impact on the offense. We know about the offensive line. It's as talented as any in the league. When you're talking about Kelly, Nelson, Pryor, Printer, and Smith, expected to be that front five. Jonathan Taylor only going to get better as a dual threat running back, running between the tackles and catching balls out of the backfield. And Indianapolis addressed one of their big needs offensively, trying to find a counterpart for Michael Pittman in a big, talented downfield threat in Alec Pierce. Imagine if they can keep Paris Campbell healthy, this passing attack will look a lot more dynamic. But defensively, adding Yannick Ngakoue goes a long way. You have to anticipate you're going to get more out of 2021 first-round pick Kwity Paye on the defensive side. I think Frank Reich realizes he needs a veteran to lead the locker room. Matt Ryan won't be under duress from start to finish. And when I look at this Colts team, I really believe 10 should be the floor for what this side can accomplish. I think they'll be in the mix for 11 or 12 wins. I think this roster is a little bit underrated in the grand scheme of things, despite how talented the AFC is from top to bottom.
All right, you're high on the Colts right now. Let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. We're talking about the team that's kind of owned this division recently. Benjamin of CBS Sports puts their roster as the 22nd ranked roster in the entire league. The odds makers have put their total at 9.5. That seems to be at odds with the odds makers a little bit. What do you say?
I think this number is a little bit too rich for a Tennessee Titans team that, in my opinion, could go into this season still reeling from what could have been last year when they were the #1 seed in the AFC. We saw in that highlight reel Ryan Tannehill talking about how he doesn't want to be a mentor going forward. What Tannehill effectively did was cost himself millions of dollars as a backup in the twilight of his career that may be coming sooner rather than later. He talked about being in a dark place this offseason, knowing he felt personally responsible for the interceptions thrown against the Cincinnati Bengals. And Tannehill's going to have to work with a different receiving core. There's no Julio Jones or A.J. Brown. I like the offseason trade for Robert Woods because Woods is as valuable as a receiver as he is a blocker on the edge to create some running lanes for what should be a healthy Derrick Henry. But you do begin to wonder, when does the tread on Henry's tires start to wear down? And if he can't go at 100%, we saw this offense really bog down in fits and spurts. You look at this team defensively, and I think this is where they're a little bit unheralded. You had a secondary that's a very interesting group with some young pieces in the defensive backfield, and Christian Fulton, who missed time last year, and first-round pick Caleb Farley. But where Tennessee really impressed me, and I didn't anticipate it last year, was getting after the opposing quarterback. We saw what Landry can do. You know the kind of impact that Bud Dupree can have when he's 100% coming off the edge and Jeffrey Simmons up front. I think Titans are going to play a lot of one-score, ugly football games, and this is a team where I think odds makers are over-anticipating what this team can do. I think the Titans take a step back. I'm going under their total.
Well, down in Jacksonville, there seems to be nowhere to go but up coming off the Urban Meyer debacle. The number is 6.5 with the Jaguars. What do you think?
I think there are a ton of questions. Jacksonville clearly had to go with an offensive mind to help with the mentorship for Trevor Lawrence, who didn't even scratch the surface, in my opinion, of what I think he can accomplish during his NFL career. So in steps Doug Peterson. We know that he's cut from an offensive cloth, but there are some questions about Peterson's ability to lead a team because you go back to Philadelphia and, of course, you can celebrate a Super Bowl championship, but how much was that on Frank Reich, who was able to work with Nick Foles and get the most out of a longtime backup quarterback? So you go through Jacksonville. They spent a ton of money in free agency to bring in some additional weapons. In Christian Kirk on the outside from Arizona, Evan Ingram to work underneath. Ingram, in my opinion, tantalizing talent, just never was able to find his capabilities operating for the Giants, largely because he couldn't stay healthy. From the offensive line standpoint, this group should be better, but there are still major questions there. And while I look at what Jacksonville did on the defensive side, in my opinion, they overpaid for a lot of players that I'm not sure are going to have the impact that Shad Khan expects. Fortunately, though, for the Jags, their win total sits at 6.5. They play in a division that doesn't have a ton of depth from top to bottom, and I really believe that Trevor Lawrence could show signs of being that perennial franchise quarterback. I'll make a case for them to go over their win total at 6.5 this year.
Top to bottom. Let's talk about the bottom of that division. Not a lot of excitement or even hope, seemingly, in Houston. The Texans may not have Deshaun Watson on their roster anymore, but they're still getting sued by what happened when Watson was in town. The odds makers have put the number at 4.5. It's one of the lowest in the league. What do you think about that number?
And rightfully so. You never know. You may have fans that want to sue the franchise for a product they're going to put on the field that won't be that competitive every single Sunday. And Lovie Smith has been tasked with obviously trying to figure out this reclamation project. You go up and down the Houston Texans roster, and the problem being is there ain't a ton of talent anywhere you look. I'm actually a little bit higher on Davis Mills than most and truly believe that if he came out this year, he would have been the first quarterback to come off the board, even ahead of Kenny Pickett. But you're not going to know what Davis Mills is as a starting quarterback at this level when you consider an offensive line led by Laramie Tunsil that doesn't offer much elsewhere along that group of five. From a skill position standpoint, what is there to get excited about? Yeah, Brandon Cooks had over 1,000 yards receiving last year, but Nico Collins was number 2 on the roster, and he had less than 500. You go out and you get John Mechie. Let's see how they can integrate him into the fold. But as far as running backs are concerned, Marlon Mack, a lifetime backup, so to speak, in Indianapolis, it's probably going to be the bell cow there. We'll see what we get out of Rex Burkhead. But again, an offense that's probably going to have their ceiling at 21 points per game. Meanwhile, defensively, again, a rebuild project to say the least. Derek Stingley tasked with being that lockdown corner, knowing how high a draft pick they used on him out of LSU. You look at Jonathan Grenard, 8 sacks a season ago, and he can be a disruptive force. The problem being for the Houston Texans, again, this is a rebuild more than anything else, and it's not one that's going to happen overnight. I look at their win total at 4.5. I'll go under. And Russ, I'll go one step further. William Hill and Caesars have an alternate win total set at 3.5 plus 190 if you want to go under there. I'd feel comfortable going under that one as well. Kind of splitting my bet right down the middle. The Texans happen to go 4-13. Worst case, it's a push and we get our money back.
Wow. Texans not expected to do very well this season. In fact, most people seem to think it's a 2-horse race in the AFC South. Who do you think is going to win the division?
For me, it's not a sexy pick by any stretch of the imagination when you bet the chalk, knowing that there are a ton of things that can go wrong But when I look at the Indianapolis Colts, I love the fact that they have 2 veteran quarterbacks in their room. Matt Ryan going to be the starter, but when you bring in Nick Foles and try and channel some of that magic we saw in Philadelphia, even if Ryan can't go 17 games, I think Foles is going to be just fine as a backup. I look at this roster from top to bottom, and I think they're a little bit undersold on the defensive side. I really like the fact that they bring in Gus Bradley to take over as defensive coordinator, knowing that Matt Eberflus took the head coaching job in Chicago. You get Stephon Gilmore on a franchise-friendly deal. He's not going to be the same lockdown corner that we saw in New England, but he's a nice piece to add to the mix. DeForest Buckner is a disruptive force, and we know what Darius Leonard brings to the table as far as a leading linebacker for this Colts stop unit. In my opinion, this team can run away with the division. I think they go clear the field by at least a game or 2. I'm happy to lay $1.15 with Indianapolis. I wouldn't be shocked if we're talking about this team closing a $1.40, maybe even a $1.50 favorite to win the division by the time the season starts in early September.
All right, Todd Fuhrman, ladies and gentlemen, with a look at the win totals, overs, and unders for the AFC South. Todd, thanks so much. Let's recap the picks. Todd likes the Colts to go over the 9.5. The Titans, the defending champs of the division, to go under. He likes the Jags doing better than 6.5. And the Texans less than 4.5, maybe even less than 3.5. And he's got the Colts winning the AFC South. This is CBS Sports HQ, presented by Capital One.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.